Friends, when I became physically disabled in my mid-20s, much of the world became inaccessible to me, including faith spaces. I've now spent nearly 2 decades making a seat at the world's table for people living with disabilities. And sometimes that has meant building a table of my very own. I feel a deep kinship with my guest today because his life is about making space at the table too. Jemar Tisby is a best-selling author, speaker, podcast host, historian, and professor who is leading the Christian community in the pursuit of racial justice. His work has been deeply meaningful to me, and I cannot wait for you to access Jemar's wisdom. Jemar graduated from Notre Dame University, got his MDiv at Reformed Theological Seminary, and is a New York Times best-selling author, which, I mean, you're really smart. Oh, my goodness. The Color of Compromise that I think came out in January 2020, no less, kind of before all the things. It was just amazing. And How to Fight Racism came out in 2021. And I've actually read How to Fight Racism, and it was so powerful. It marked me, Jemar. Wow. So I want to ask you a few questions, but really I want you to share whatever the heck you would like, because you're full of brilliance and goodness, and we're here for it.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yes. Welcome, Jemar. Hello. I forgot that.
One of the cool things is we share a Southern connection, I think. So I grew up in the Midwest near Chicago, but right after college, I went to the Delta in Arkansas. So about an hour south of Memphis. And that's where I've spent most of my adult life, and it's been deeply formative for me. So it was cool to hear that you're a Southern woman, and I'm sure we could talk a lot about food and humidity and mosquitoes and all of the things that make the South very interesting.
Oh my goodness, yes. So I'm guessing if you were like South Haven, Mississippi, probably would have been in that same pocket, kind of. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, I've spoken at a number of conferences in that region before, and I know it well, actually. So
very cool.
Crazy. But you now reside in Chicago. No, in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and who knows where I'll end up. I'm a rambling man in that sense, but yeah, and I thank you for the introduction and those books, Color of Compromise, How to Fight Racism, and my latest book is The Spirit of Justice. All are sort of in the same space of trying to both inform as well as equip and encourage people for the work of racial justice today.
Oh my goodness. Okay, what's the name of your last book? We all got to get that one.
The Spirit of Justice, True Stories of Faith, Race, and Resistance. Yeah, so like if the Color of Compromise is, I jokingly put it, it's white people behaving badly around race, then The Spirit of Justice is how Black people resisted racism because of their faith. And so part of this is to answer or respond to the critique that, well, Christianity is only used in negative ways when it comes to race or injustice. And then I'm like, wait a minute, what about all of the people who found ways to resist injustice because of their Christian religion as well? We must talk about that story in the same breath.
Absolutely. Oh goodness, cannot wait to read that. Wow, I got a long list always going, but it's going to be put on that list. I know you do too. Okay, Jemar, listen. You have a fascinating origin story. Today you work at the intersection of race, religion, and social justice, but you took the long way to get there. Will you tell us a bit about how you got here, where you are today?
It started in high school health class. That's how I blame it.
Perfect. Okay.
So I was a freshman in high school. There was this guy in my health class named Christopher. We called him Toph for short, and we slowly became friends. Over time, he invited me to his youth group, and I had grown up sort of around Christianity. There was no hostility there, but it wasn't really anything that was a personal priority for me. And so he invited me to this youth group, and it was everything, a high school boy could be interested in. It had food, it had games, it had girls. And I was like, okay, this seems like a good time. Let's keep going. But slowly, those messages, those little homilies and sermons, they started to sink in, and I had a classic conversion story, prayed the sinner's prayer and accepted Jesus into my heart and became a Christian. What I didn't know was this would be what we call a white evangelical space. And what's so interesting is over time, I came to understand that my passion for racial justice really doesn't stem from such negative experiences in those early days. It stems from such positive ones. I really felt embraced by this community, but to the extent that I ever felt like different or other, it was because of race.
Yes.
And as is so often the case, it's not that people were overt about it. It's not that people were looking at me and saying, "Ooh, your skin is brown. You can't sit with us." Nothing like that. It was more about not what they said, but what they didn't say, and not what they did, but what they didn't do. So it was as if my racial background and all the experiences that came with it, it just ceased to exist once we walked through the doors of that youth group, or later the church attached to it. Yes. And so I was like, this isn't right. And we need to speak up and do something about it.
You found yourself in some dramatically different environments. You have found yourself in some dramatically different environments, mostly white evangelical congregations contrasted with your students. That has sent you looking for insight from trusted Christian sources. But you couldn't find satisfying answers when it came to racial injustice. In my own way, I felt a similar dissonance between the disability community and the church. It has really, really discouraged me at times. In fact, side note, quick story, the ADA, you've heard of that? ADA, kind of a big deal, American with Disabilities Act, which is great in some ways. Not perfect, but fine. The churches, American churches, did not have to implement the ADA. They got an exemption. So they did not have to make their churches accessible to people with disabilities. So when I've spoken at some racial reconciliation nights and things, I've made a fascinating parallel there, that our churches have not always been on the right side of history. And it's a little, pretty nuts if you think about it.
It is. I did not know that. Wow.
So my question is, how did you move forward when you couldn't find those answers?
Well, you spoke of the dissonance, and a lot of that is connected to what I first started talking about, the Southern connection, because the reason I went down south to the Delta was to become a teacher. I was a 6th grade science and social studies teacher, and then a middle school principal. That was my first career all throughout my first decade of working. And
God bless you. God bless you.
Oh my goodness. I couldn't even fathom doing it now. I'm like, only a 20-something could have the energy. But it was a transformative experience because where I was living, Helena, Arkansas, in Phillips County, it was the 4th poorest county in the country. And all of the issues of poverty weren't abstract. They took on a human face in the form of my students. I mean, we had kids coming to school and hadn't eaten, or their grocery store was the gas station, essentially. We had parents who had to make the choice between fixing their car or paying the light bill, and they couldn't do both. We had they were coming in 1 and 2 grade levels behind in just about everything. So, but it's also the Bible Belt, and there's a church on every block, both black and white.
Right.
But I'm wondering, like, what difference is this making? If we have such people who are saying we follow Jesus, and yet there's not only this crushing poverty, but everything that comes with it, the segregation, the dismissal of rural populations, all of that. So I went on this search and I couldn't find many materials in the evangelical and then Reformed theological spaces I was in and resources I was looking at. So you asked me what I did. I had to create my own curriculum in a sense. So I ended up going to seminary, but nothing in the traditional seminary track was really focused on justice in the way that I knew it needed to be based on my experience in the Delta and as a teacher. So I had to go out looking for my own resources, which were there, but it was like doing a whole separate seminary degree in the midst of the standard one.
So interesting, and such a powerful picture of such deep, just horrible poverty and the church on every corner. It's just so striking, such deprivation, and supposed to be the hope of Jesus in that story, not always translating perfectly, no doubt. Wow. Really, really powerful, Jemar. Listen, some people see racial justice as a secondary faith issue rather than an integral part of God's kingdom coming to this earth. Tell me why you know that racial justice is a gospel matter.
There's a lot of different ways we can take it. One, I go to Galatians 3:28. There is no Jew or Gentile, slave or free, male or female. All are one in Christ Jesus. There's a unity there. Ephesians talks about the body and how we are one body and many parts. Jesus has torn down the veil of separation between us and God, but also between us and each other. And so the church itself should be the living embodiment of unity. And where there is division due to injustice, that is a departure from Jesus's vision of the church. So that's on a very basic level. On another level, it's a justice issue because what I say in my first book, The Color of Compromise, there would be no black church without racism in the white church, which is to say that the reason there are majority black churches isn't because of some deep theological divide over the doctrine of the Trinity or the incarnation or something like that.
Yeah.
It was because white Christians were saying black people can't be baptized here or can't be ordained here or can't preach to white people or mixed race audiences or can't be members of the elders or anything like that. And black people are like, we shouldn't be treated like second-class citizens in the household of God. And to this day, I think there is a need for black churches whenever there is racism in predominantly white churches, because these need to be safe spaces of growth and healing and of reaffirming our intrinsic dignity as image bearers of God. And if we want that to change, then the burden is on majority white spaces to say, what do we need to learn? What do we need to confess? What do we need to repair in order for unity to be possible?
Amen. This isn't a fully formed thought, but I think all of that is true in disability contexts, 100%, because God called every human being, no matter what color they are or how their body works or doesn't work, to be on earth together in this moment. Yes. God has called each one of us, no matter our small differences of body type or color or whatever, to live together and occupy the earth in this moment. This intersection of time and space is all we have together. And God's called us to that. So, like I said, not really a formed thought, but hello, like God put us on earth together for such a time as this, wake up world.
Yes, so, and amen.
It makes a lot of sense to figure this out and live well together in unity. Duh. So, when you imagine God's kingdom come, what does total justice look like for you?
That's a pleasant thought, one that we should dwell on more often, because I think actually resistance starts with a vision of what you desire, of your desired outcome, of the world you imagine in place of an unjust one. So we often start with what we're against. How can we get better at articulating what we're for? I think that's what is so appealing about something like the beloved community that Martin Luther King Jr. popularized, is because it's giving a picture, a vision of what could be if we make these changes and move toward justice. So to me, what that picture looks like is a phrase I often use: frolic in your purpose. Frolic in your purpose. I love that word frolic. It's a playful word for play. And when I go back to Genesis, the Lord creates the earth, and he's like, this is yours to co-create with me in the sense of forming and shaping, and use your imagination. And when we picture heaven, it's not just us floating up in the clouds, right? It is heaven coming down to earth and remaking everything and redeeming everything. And then what will we do for eternity? I think we'll create, we'll play, we'll shape, we'll form, we'll craft, we'll learn, we'll explore everything in a perfectly harmonious environment. And so for me, what justice leads to, and I define justice as making wrong things right. What justice leads to is the ability for people to define their God-given purpose and then to go play in it and to create in it. And when we do that, we actually bless ourselves and others.
What a fabulous answer. Frolic in your purpose. Is that the phrase? Frolic in your purpose?
Yes.
Goodness, I can't help but think I get to do that a whole lot. I get to frolic in my purpose, and it's glorious. I love frolicking in my purpose. Amen. What a great thought. I don't often say the word frolic, but I love it, and I'm here for it. Good choice. Jemar, you've described your work as making space at the table for Black Christians, and sometimes that work has actually required that you build an entirely new table. What has it meant for you to build that new table?
I love this question. And that metaphor of a table is just so powerful, right? There's a spiritual component to it, of a heavenly banquet, of a table that Christ sets for us. And I think it's actually...
Yes. I am sorry to interrupt, but my word, Jemar, you have no idea. My whole ministry is based around the table. Like everything I do is about everybody on this planet deserves to be at the table together. We come and feast, and it's deeply connected to the fact I did not eat for 11 months. I was on a feeding tube. So I'm a big fan of the table, but I believe if you're more fortunate than anyone else in this world, you better spend your life building a bigger table and saying, come and sit with me.
Wow.
Anyway, proceed.
That's a sermon. I love that. And the same, like I said, going all the way back to that high school youth group, where I felt, in a sense, I had a space at the table, but I also felt that it was limited. So a lot of times when we're talking about white evangelical spaces, it's very seldom there's any sort of overt people saying we don't want Black or brown people here, whatever the case may be. But you get the other signs. So it'll come where the musical worship is all one style or familiar with one culture of people. You'll come with sermon illustrations, right? Which are all coming from a certain perspective. When you go into the pastor's study and you look at their commentaries and the books that they're learning from, and they're all from a sort of one type of tradition, you'll get it in the activities or even the church location, right? It's coming through loud and clear who this table was built for. And so what I've learned over time is, for me, and this is not for everyone, but for me, I was spending a lot of energy trying to make space at a table that was never built for me. And eventually I said, well, actually, maybe I should spend less time and energy trying to elbow my way into a space that wasn't built for me. And because I'm trying to change things to be more inclusive, sometimes they don't even want me there. Maybe I need to build my own table. So that's what my nonprofit, The Witness, a Black Christian collective, was about. Now that's what even my Substack, where I write weekly, is about. It's being able to set the table that I think in a way that I think it needs to be set so as to include more people in ways that counteract the ways I was excluded because of race.
That's pretty cool. You are clearly an amazing human being, because I think that's it. Don't we all need to do that? Don't we all need to make our own table and say, come on, everybody. Everybody come and feast. Big fan. My listeners are living with all kinds of disabilities, hurt, and heartbreak, what I like to call invisible wheelchairs. They feel like the church is not made for them, and faith communities can be very hard places to be in. For many of us, it might feel easier to abandon the faith altogether. Have you ever reached the point of desperation? What has kept you holding on to the church, to Jesus, to faith, despite it all?
Jesus never let me go.
Mm-hmm.
That's the simplest answer and the truest one, because I can't claim any sort of special faith or strength in that sense. What I have always felt is the companionship of Jesus, and that's an aspect of Christianity I dwell on maybe the most. Is God's presence is the blessing. And so I love going to Joshua chapter 1, where in the first 9 verses, God says to Joshua, be strong and courageous, be strong and very courageous, be strong and courageous.
Be afraid, yeah.
But the last time that God has this command, be strong and courageous, it also comes with a promise, for I will be with you wherever you go. And the way that God just lays it out, God always has a plan. That promise, I will be with you, becomes a person, Emmanuel, God with us. And
yes.
So what keeps me in the faith is that Jesus keeps me, and Jesus's presence is not only near. I would dare say that when you're doing the work of justice, when you're doing the work of building more inclusive tables, Jesus feels nearer to you, or we draw nearer to Jesus because we're closer to God's heart of love and relationship with humanity. And so, in a very selfish way, I do a lot of what I do is to get more of Jesus. And God's never left me. And so I do my best not to leave God. All that in the same breath as the institutional church has caused a lot of harm to a lot of people for various reasons. And also now, given our socio-political context, what is happening is a sifting in the church. One of my friends called it an apocalyptic moment in the classic sense of the word. Apocalypse means to reveal. And so it's a revealing moment about where churches and church leaders and congregations truly stand when it comes to marginalized people groups. And so there are a lot of people falling away from the institutional church, which
I know.
I totally understand. I also think it's an opportunity to revisit our definition of church and expand it. So for me, this all happened during COVID. I was pastoring at the time. I was the pastor of this tiny little rural church in Arkansas. And we didn't have but a handful of people, no money. And I'm seeing all these mid to large sized churches pivoting really quickly because they already had an audiovisual team. They already had cameras and sound and all that stuff. And so to put it online while we were social distancing wasn't a big deal. But we couldn't do that. We didn't have all that. We didn't have the people. We didn't have the resources. We didn't have the money. And it started me to really reconsider, well, what actually is church? Is it a building? Is it a time of day and week? Is it the stuff we do in terms of the bells and the whistles? And I said, if every church can't do it, every gathering of believers can't do it, it can't be essential to what it means to be the church. So what is essential to being the church? Being with each other. Its presence, whether through a screen or in prayer or in bodily presence, its presence, right? And so that, I think, is what people are perhaps discovering or rediscovering anew in this moment where more and more people find it difficult to go to organized church settings. But what I would encourage people to do is, like the Bible said, do not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encourage one another day by day for as long as it's called today. And you can do that in various forms and configurations. And I do think Sunday morning worship is important. And I do think the institutional church is important. I do know there are healthy churches out there, but also for the people who are hurting and for the people who can't bring themselves to go into a church building or an organized church setting, there is a broader definition, a biblical definition of church that I think is helpful for us to embrace.
Gosh, absolutely. You know, before I became suddenly a person living with profound disabilities, all my theology made all the sense in the world and fit neatly into boxes, everything. And then suddenly everything kind of went nuts after the stroke. Just as I worked with people living with profound disabilities of all kinds and their extended families, I thought, oh, suddenly everything doesn't fit so neatly in a bow anymore. Everybody can't be at church on a Sunday morning, and everybody can't experience salvation just like I understood the salvation experience to be, honestly. Everything just got a lot messier and more complicated, and all the church heard, all the scripture that had been weaponized among my population, all of the well-meaning Christian friends and family that said the most horrific things, that the unconfessed sin is why your child has spina bifida kind of things. Like, church got really messy when I did a little bit more research into what my population is living through. And I deeply love church and am a huge fan of Sunday morning local church. Absolutely. I don't pretend to think if you're not at church on a Sunday morning, you aren't really a Christ follower. That's so silly. I just think there's just such a need for grace for the complicated, messy lives that we actually have. Can we show grace?
And people are really trying to still follow Jesus and still practice this religion. I mean, so often the people who aren't in an organized church setting, for one reason or another, are still trying to be faithful, sincere believers. And so to lay that extra burden on them of, well, you have to be in this certain place at a certain time to be in good standing with God. I think that does more harm than good oftentimes.
Right. Oh, I am with you there. It is all, yeah, a lot of rules that are man-made, and it's very sad. Listen, Jemar, one thing I'm really doing in this season of my life is really hoping to learn and investigate and uncover a lot of truths about soul formation. And I would love to ask you, what was the single best investment you have made in your soul to build resilience, fortitude, and perseverance? Because you got it going, so I'm curious.
I think there would probably be different answers in different seasons of my life. So, for instance, when I was in graduate school for a PhD, the best investment was learning U.S. racial history, because that was truth after truth after truth after truth that just became undeniable and inescapable and cemented me in this calling to work for racial justice. I would say now the single biggest investment is something that I hope everyone can do. It's journaling. For me, that's been transformational, and I got into it through the author Julia Cameron and her book, The Artist's Way, which is very popular, millions and millions of books sold. So I would encourage people to start with that book, The Artist's Way. It's at my bookshop. And But then she recommends two practices. One is an artist date, where you do something that inspires your creative side. It could be a museum, it could be going outside, it could be whatever. But the other is what's been truly transformative for me, and that's called morning pages. And that's 3 pages of freehand, free flow of consciousness, stream of consciousness writing by hand. And it just unlocked so many emotions, so many thoughts, so many dreams, right? Like it's not just about getting the bad stuff out.
Right.
It's about it going back to frolicking your purpose. It's about, what is my purpose? And then what can I do with that? And that's the joy of being here, and knowing that you're here for a purpose, and then being able to fulfill that for a purpose. And a lot of people ask me, how do you put out so much stuff, whether it's social media, articles on Substack, talks I give, videos I produce, whatever. And I'm like, it feels like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so it's labor, but it doesn't feel onerous. It doesn't feel unpleasant. And I just keep doing it. And that's what I hope for everyone. And journaling has really helped me in that sense.
I love that. And perhaps it is a large part of how you frolic in your purpose. Exactly. I have to tell you, Jemar, I like to say a lot that if you have a pulse, you have a purpose. And that means every single one of us, because we're on earth, we are living with breath in our lungs. So we better get busy living our purpose. And
100%. That'll preach.
Yeah, that's it. And I just love that charge. I also want to throw out there with get creative idea of do what inspires you. I had this awakening. My hand doesn't work to write, so it's very difficult to write for me. So I have no fine motor in this hand. My right hand, no less, and I'm very right hand dominant.
Yeah.
So when I write notes, and I'll write you one so you see this, my handwriting is, I mean, whoa. It's hard to even read. It's nearly, you can't even make the words out fully. And it's really rough. And when I finish a card, I look at it and I have come to feel such pride in it, because I realize it's my art. It's like I painted a picture for somebody. And it's this glorious, creative, almost frolicking in my purpose moment, because I'm like, this is a beautiful creation. And it's much more than just like a silly thank you note. It's like this took some sweat equity to create this masterpiece. And I'm a big fan of use what you got, even if it doesn't work perfectly, and get creative. So I think the constraints in all of our stories do, in fact, lead us to be creative. It provides clarity and creativity, the constraints in all of our stories. I'm sure you know that well, having studied U.S. history a titch. Strangely, constraints create creativity and clarity.
100%.
Listen, yeah, Jemar, if you were to restart your life, what habits or disciplines would you put into place as early as possible to prepare you for the work God has planned for you to do on earth?
That is a fascinating question. What first comes to mind for me is to study history. I majored in American Studies undergrad, and there was a history component to it, and I always loved it, but it wasn't a major part, I would say, of my studies before or after. But when I came to study history in an organized, disciplined, consistent way, it was transformative. One of the stories I tell in my first book, The Color of Compromise, is about the Virginia Assembly in 1667. This is a group of white Anglican men, so Christians, and they made a law that said baptism would not emancipate an enslaved indigenous person, African person, or person of mixed race descent. And that fascinated me for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got race, religion, and politics all intertwined. So you've got this legislative body, a political body, making a law, a political act about a religious rite, baptism, that was focused around race.
Yes, yeah.
And so we can talk about race, religion, politics separately, but they're always intertwined.
Right. Yeah, they are.
Which, because I get a lot of people saying, well, you shouldn't talk about this race stuff, that's political. I'm like,
can you imagine how much I get, Jemar? You have no idea.
Oh, my
like,
goodness.
Excuse me, it's all connected.
Yes, you get it. And so the other thing that stuck out to me was the timing. So history is all about change or continuity over time. So when stuff happens is important. 1667 is more than a century before the Declaration of Independence, more than a century before the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. So this intertwining of race, religion, and politics in really a pernicious way predates the political entity known as the United States. So there's never an era where we were free of this, where this wasn't an issue. And so it's baked into the DNA and the structure of our nation. And therefore, it is something that we have to constantly and consistently address.
Wow. Yes, it is.
So, yeah, learning that earlier would be helpful.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Listen, Jemar, last question for you that would be maybe along the same lines. Jemar, you've worked with kids for years as an educator, and you've since written books for kids about racial justice. From your perspective, what are some key ways we can raise kids with truly Christ-like character?
So glad you asked that question. It's so important. Number one, tell kids the truth. Tell them in an age-appropriate way, but we have to, as adults, get way more comfortable with talking about the hard facts of history, like racism. So I wrote my first picture book, Stories of the Spirit of Justice, which is ideal for kids ages 4 to 7. It's hard hitting. I mean, there are slave ships in it. There is the auction block in it. And it's a gorgeous book, but it's some real tough conversations, but it opens up space to have those conversations. So number one, tell the kids the truth, tell them early, in an age appropriate way. Number two is, teach them they have agency. Teach them that if something wrong is being done or happens, they have a voice. And they can influence outcomes in positive ways. We often treat children as if they have no say or can't do anything on their own without an adult. And we want to instill in kids from an early age that I can influence the world around me in a positive way, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And then, and then lastly is just the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated, which, Jesus, pretty wise person. I think he knew what he was talking about when asked, what's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself, because if you do, then a lot of our problems go away really quickly.
Right.
And if we teach our children that and really mean it and model it, more importantly, then that makes a massive difference.
I love that. I was very strangely and straight from the Lord wired as this just truly a bleeding heart for the things that are of his heart. And I have just always wanted to equip parents to raise more little Katherine, to get fired up about everything and long to be the weird one who stands up for the kid being bullied in 5th grade and who goes on from there to fight bullies their whole lives. And yeah, thank you for that, Jemar. Thank you. Listen, Jemar, this podcast is called The GoodHard Story, and we have a large amount of listeners who, I like to say, have disabilities on the inside of their bodies. Yes, we have listeners for sure who have disabilities, physical, in their story. But there's so many of us with disabilities inside that no one would know about if they saw us in the grocery store. But goodness, it's eating us alive and everything in between. So much hard stuff, just gut-wrenching pain is in so many stories of so many human beings on earth, as you well know. So the GoodHard Story podcast is always sharing the truth that life is both good and hard. At the very same time, there are good things and hard things and hard things and good things. And that tension is the reality of this world. And so my question for you is, what is good in your story? What is hard in your story? And how do you live in the tension of both of those in your good, hard story?
Such a beautiful way to put it. There's so much good. There's so much good in my story. I think the best parts are the people I've encountered, whether we're still, in touch or they were there for a season. But I've learned so much and received so much love and encouragement and perspective from people. The hard part is people have been the source of so much pain.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yes.
The best and the worst wrapped into one.
Absolutely.
The rejection I felt, the skepticism and the cynicism about my work in racial justice is very hard.
Of course.
But as you said, there's creativity that comes from constraints.
Yes.
And so it's learning the ways around and over and through and under all of these obstacles and pains and hurt and harm that has led to. So I'll give you one quick historical example.
Sure.
So going back to the Delta, not only is it one of the poorest places, one of the most segregated places. And there was a woman named Fannie Lou Hamer who was born in 1917. She was the 20th of 20 children. And she was a poor sharecropper in Sunflower County, Mississippi, grew up poor, only got a 6th grade education, married a sharecropper, would have lived and died in obscurity, literally just picking cotton for her whole life until she went to church one night in 1962, and there was a voter registration organizing meeting, and she volunteered to go register to vote. They got turned away at gunpoint, but that initiated her civil rights career as a voting rights activist and an anti-poverty activist. And one of the things that is so remarkable to me about history and justice, no matter where you look globally or when you look historically, is that in the hardest places, there are people doing the most good. Like the Fannie Lou Hamers of the world.
Oh, gosh, yes. In the hardest places, there are people doing the most good. Oh, that's glorious. I love Sandy, and I don't know her and never will,
You
but
will love yes.
I'll meet her in heaven. She's a champion of the faith, no doubt.
100%.
And
You will love Fannie Lou Hamer. I write about her in basically every book I've written, and she's one of my historical heroes.
For sure.
And
I know I've heard her story before. Maybe it's in How to Fight Racism,
it
and
is, yes.
she's at the helm. Well, listen, this white girl in Atlanta, Georgia, who doesn't have much street cred, Fanny, can't wait to meet you one day, girl. Thank you for paving the way. I mean it. Okay, Jemar, last thing. Tell our listeners where they can get more of what we talked about today.
Best place to go to is jemartisby.substack.com. I call Substack is like a newsletter on steroids, but it's where I do my latest writing, and I have a top 10 publication in the history category. So a lot of people are finding value in it. Other than that, follow me on Instagram. That's where I do a lot of my hot takes on current events and what's happening in the world. I'm on Instagram at Jemar Tisby.
I love following you.
We can get spicy on there sometimes, but it's necessary.
For sure. You know what's so interesting? And I will speak to my listeners for a moment, if I may. Whether or not you land at exactly the same place as any other human being, and I mean in anything in the political realm, in the spiritual realms, can't we learn from each other? Can't we say, you know what I believe enough to be okay if you don't land at exactly the same place? Guys, why are we in these echo chambers where we think if someone thinks something different than what I think, I can't engage them? That's really a sadness of our time, as we are tuning out voices that maybe we're not 100% aligned with. What on earth, people? Believe what you believe enough to engage the voices of others. I hate, Jemar, that anyone would tune out any voice such as yours because they don't align with one thing you said 10 years ago. Come on, what a joke. Everybody needs to wake up and engage more thoughtful voices not on their own page already. You already know what you believe if they're saying the same thing that you keep listening to. Anyway, a little bit of a soapbox, but it makes me sad that Christians can do that. Christians, the ones who should know what they believe already. Goodness. It's weird. Anyway, I treasure my time with you. You are a modern day Fanny, I must say. You are at the helm of bringing in more such important change and conversations about how to change our world. So I am deeply grateful. And I know there are so many of us out there who are saying, yes, 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 give us more true Jesus and justice. Give us more Christ-centered alignment, period. Hard stop. And I thank you for your voice.
Thank you. A wonderful conversation. Amen.
Oh, well, you are a blessing, Jemar. And I don't know why I'm crying. I'm so awkward. But you just need to know. I'm sure there are weird, mean people out there in the world. But you need to know there are also many of us quietly saying, yes, you are a voice we will listen to, and we will look to you as you look to Jesus. And that's special. So thank you.
Thank you.
God bless you.